You know, some people might suggest that this is a man titled The Prince with No Power. We're talking, of course, about the former royal known as Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. And in today's by royal appointment, I wanted to take you through exactly where he now truly is and the problems that really are facing Prince Harry alongside his wife, the former cable TV actress Meghan Markle. And truly, where do they now go from here? As ever, let me explain. Morning, nice to see you. Thank you so much for your time today. And of course, for joining me on another episode of By Royal Appointment. I appreciate the fact that many of you take a lot of your time out to, of course, join me for the extended editions. And it's nice to, as I say, to share the stories because when you think about it, let's be honest, there we have a man who literally has now no power. And this was more, well, really no more obvious than the recent stunt that he put together walking in Angola, taking, of course, the same path that his late mother, Diana, the Princess of Wales, did. Of course, when she did that way back in 1997, it was seen as absolutely dramatic. A lot of people forget that what Diana did was some sterling work against all of the drama and the fallouts and the affairs and things like that. That's lost sight of. You have to remember she was able to draw attention to many wonderful causes without the world of social media. The internet, if you remember, was in its infancy. Now it's swipe and go. And this is truly what Harry's found out. He thought that this particular walk in Angola was going to be the kickback to all the negativity, particularly at the start of this year with Centre Barley. That could not have got off as a worse start. I mentioned this on a previous video when you think, there's Meghan Markle rushing out to the sand. Harry's now relegated to iPhone operator filming his wife. Well, she writes 2025 in the sand. You could have said that could be the level of money that they're going to be paying out, clearly because now they don't have any major, things attached to their name. And I've often said this, and people take this the wrong way. It's not about taking sides. It's about the thing that I don't understand. When you're in this game of show business, and I've been in this game a long time, when you are given those wonderful opportunities, it's about making sure you capitalize on them. And more so, you understand exactly that it's fleeting. It doesn't last forever. And very quickly, people who loved you now loathe you, particularly if you don't deliver. And in the case of Harry and Meghan, they truly haven't delivered. Harry, according to a source, literally is at a crossroads in his life. You see, Meghan Markle's always been a hustler, somebody that could move on to the next phase, whether that be a job, game show, or husbands, depending on where she is. You know, people forget that when she was first dating Prince Harry, she was also still dating the chef, some kind of celebrity chef, always keeping her options open. Our late and brilliant monarch, Queen Elizabeth, really had the full measure of Meghan Markle. When she decided, the Queen, very nicely to say to Meghan, you know, dear, you could always continue in the career that you've got. Meghan knew that career as a 30-odd-year-old actress was shot. You know, her big moment being on Suits was well and truly over. So she was really thrilled to get a new starring role in yet another long-running soap opera. That was in her eyes. What you have to remember is, of course, Prince Harry, interestingly, thought that Meghan really believed in his dream of disappearing over to Africa to look after impoverished elephants and other wildlife. This was something he tried with various girls along the way. Meghan, you know, as Prince William pointed out, was certainly nothing special. This was Harry's sort of dream. I truly believe that this is what Harry wanted to do when he said he wanted to step away from the monarchy. I don't think he disliked it to the level that he was now poisoned in, but at the time, I think he thought he could do something, maybe away from the spotlight, enjoying life with somebody who had the same views and values as he did. But of course, this was Meghan. She was never going to be too far from a Starbucks, or indeed, Bel Air or wherever she fancies shopping. But she convinced him, and this is the problem. Now, what about Harry having no power? Well, the problem that you've got now is his speeches that he puts up on his website really very, very rarely get re-recorded. In his time in the monarchy, they would have been put out there as, front page news, interesting topics, that sort of stuff. Not because he was well liked, but perhaps he had something worthwhile to say. The bigger problem that you now have with Harry and Meghan is they're seen as professional whingers. Everything's a problem. Doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, it's a problem. Now for Meghan, looking at the catastrophe that was the Netflix deal, which again should have all gone swimmingly, well, suddenly she now has lost the power that she truly thought she had. She won't admit it, but Harry understands at least that level. The phone call's gone dead, and more importantly, Hollywood doesn't want anything to do with them. You need Hollywood on side, whether that be you become an Emmy presenter, you get invited to all the A-list events, that sort of stuff. You know what I'm talking about. But now Harry has to forge a way forward in deciding where he goes next. And this is not the same dream that his wife Meghan Markle has. You see, the problem for Meghan is she doesn't see the problem of what's gone wrong before. Harry at least has got the grip of that. Meghan believes there are other opportunities simply because she is HRH, Duchess Meghan. But as the phone remains silent and her team behind the scenes, including Ari Emanuel over at William Morris Endeavour, even he's now finding that actually perhaps, and as ever, allegedly, they weren't the great catch that even he thought. So what goes next? The bigger issue now in Meghan and Harry's marriage is simply this, because this really happened on that recent trip to Angola, where he decided to go to Botswana, remember? And the bottom line was that this wasn't necessarily down as a visit. The problem really was that nobody bothered to tell, as ever, I have to say allegedly, Meghan Markle. And what was interesting about this was that clearly it was something that really upset her, simply because the two people, the two people that apparently are very close to Prince Harry, Anita and Michael Holding, well, the bottom line was he sees them as sort of surrogate parents. We've been told this many times about Harry, though, haven't we? How he's always looking for another surrogate father, you know, whether it be another person or this person. Clearly looking for somebody to give him the validation that he desperately requires. And I'm not knocking him for that. That's exactly what certain people do. But you see, behind the scenes, apparently, Meghan Markle really just thought he was going to do the Angola thing and then straight back. But Harry, as we now know, wanted to clear his head. What's strange about this particular visit, when you think about it, is a few years back, Harry literally took the bride-to-be, Meghan Markle, to meet these two people because he was so sure that he met the woman of his dreams, and no doubt still thinks that he has. But this was sort of validation from them of, look, you know, I'm doing the right thing, right? I'm showing you what I'm planning to do. Now, what was interesting was, according to a source who works with Harry, is simply the fact that behind the scenes, Harry desperately just wanted to get back to something that he remembers himself. And this is truly all to do with the fact that, when you think about it, in the last few years, the last 7 years probably, Harry literally has been manipulated like a Thunderbird's puppet. You see, wherever he goes, there's somebody stroking his back, clutching his arm, clutching his hand, telling him, you meet this person, now you've done enough speaking, I need to go first. Now, in the beginning, as always happens in relationships like this, he was more than happy to step away from the limelight. This is a man that had enjoyed the limelight all of his life. Meghan Markle was desperate to attain it. Suddenly, there's a guy that everybody wants to meet because of his association with the monarchy, and suddenly she could capitalize on that. She could force herself through, making sure that she was equal in the stature of, I'm here as well as Harry, don't forget me. Well, a former cable TV actress against, of course, the son of the King of England and, of course, the head of the monarchy. Well, really, what does it mean to that? That Meghan wasn't having any of it, and for a while Harry was more than happy to go along with it. But as a source told me behind the scenes, things are now radically different. You see, Harry does want to be sure that he's recognised for the things that he's very passionate about, and that is, of course, the endless charity work. But that's took a massive beating, all thanks to Centre Barley and African Parks. So now, what he plans to do is this. Prince Harry believes that he can truly build back on the good name and the good work that he did for many years. And that was part and parcel of the idea of recreating once again the Angola landmine walk. And the reason why he wanted to meet with these two people that he holds very dear to his heart is simply to say, well, what do you think to this? He wanted an outside opinion, not the people that he is paying for, you know, the brand new communications team, that sort of stuff. What happens when you're a celebrity, and Harry knows this all too well, having mixed with celebrities from the very off, is that, well, basically you're paying them and they will say anything in order to cash in the paycheck. Meghan Markle, of course, comes from a sort of slightly different showbiz background, never attaining the heights that she so desperately wanted. But what she really wanted, of course, was the fame. The fame's come through, but Harry knows now at what cost. What he wanted was them to become a power couple, that people would represent them as a sort of force of nature. They're doing good for charity. And I truly believe that that was his angle in the beginning. Of course, as we later found out, even our late brilliant monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, had very serious doubts about the intentions of whether Meghan was in fact in love with Prince Harry, or did she engineer the romance, as it's now been very politely put. You see, when you're an actress of a certain age, 30s, and there's not much coming in and you've been written out of your only high hope, you look around. And Meghan was desperately trying to find somebody over here in England because she felt that this was a territory that would welcome her. As we all know, she tried reality TV shows, hookups with X Factor stars and perhaps even famous footballers, but none of them worked until this came along. Now, when you think about it, Harry, as I've often said, is a rather charming man-child in many respects. He couldn't quite believe his luck that this particular woman had shown interest in him. Prince William saw right through it. But of course, once again, the brother rivalry thing was never going to, well, come out well. He just felt that William was trying to stamp on his only chance of happiness. And what's interesting now, and I've said this previously, is that when you consider this, that Harry now wants to share his diary with his elder brother. Now, this didn't go down well with Markle at all. She doesn't believe they have to share anything. They're an independent force, and why on earth should she have to now curtail? She keeps reminding Harry, and this is an important factor, all thanks to ex-staff, that is in fact them that should be still apologising to her for the way that she was treated in a short tenure inside the British monarchy. So you can see how this is developing and how, well, in the end, somebody's got to give. It's as simple as that. What many people are suggesting, though, is, will Prince Harry finally give in again to Meghan Markle's demands? She still wants to push ahead with her own, well, making money forward, if you like, billionaire-esque dreams. Harry would like to return to some sort of life that he had before, not necessarily the full royal life. And that was the meeting, and that was the idea when he went over to Botswana. Interesting. Meghan Markle's quest to become a billionaire-esque, well, it's always fascinating in itself to me because you have to work very hard to become a billionaire. A millionaire is almost impossible, but there you go. People have those dreams. Now, Meghan, you see, was fascinating because we were often told that she turned up at the British monarchy with 5 million. And that's a bit debatable in itself when you think. And also it was alluded in certain books, particularly the Revenge book by Tom Bower, that allegedly her mother, Doria, was on some kind of retainer within the royal family. Do you remember that? I'm not quite sure how true that is, but it's an interesting sort of facet to the story, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it. But of course, Meghan's dreams to become a billionaire-esque literally have fallen apart. And that's all thanks to the messy sort of fallout of the Netflix deal. And again, really, she has nobody but to blame but herself because she didn't do anything to promote it. And more importantly, I think she believed, and this is what happens when you live in a showbiz bubble, that you think, well, the audience, I'm here. I mean, surely they're just going to buy it. And that's your problem when it starts. What you don't know, though, is this. At the start of the year, if you remember, we were all treated to this particular video. And if you remember, this video was, well, it was kind of shot by Prince Harry, wasn't it? And the bottom line is, it was supposed to make her relatable in a white cotton blouse. I thought she looked very fresh-faced. And the idea really was she was just sharing some gossip because apparently we were all so intrigued and she wanted to let you know what was happening, And what was interesting was this was the sort of marketing push into how, as ever with Love Meghan, was truly apparently going to take off. This was the deal, right? But it didn't quite work out that way, and once again, another backlash. You see, this was hot on the backlash of the Billie Eilish stuff. Do you remember that? Where Meghan claimed suddenly some stuff had been delivered because she'd met somebody at the LA fires. I mean, if you could keep getting it wrong, then this was literally the A box to keep getting it wrong in. Now, as we know, Ted Sarandos was this big flag-waving guy that said Meghan Markle could literally get anybody to buy anything. And I admired Ted's sort of thing, really, to be that bold and blunt and say, you know, the world's wrong, I'm going to prove you wrong, this woman I'm investing in, and that's the thing. This was the point where Meghan decided to announce to camera that, in fact, well, you know, she'd been offered the chance for Netflix to invest in her company. And do you remember the famous line, well, I thought about it? That always made me laugh. Anybody who's doing a business, if somebody offers to invest, you literally bite their hand off, because it means you can get going, you can push forward, all of that sort of stuff. We now know, of course, that Netflix literally, like so many things, were pushing hard simply because they wanted Meghan to get going. And they figured if they invested and brought people in, because remember, she couldn't get a CEO and she couldn't get people on her side because Meghan couldn't find the right person that she wanted to run the company. Here's where this gets interesting, because the video that you saw, the eventual video with Harry filming it, well, originally this was going to be, and as ever I have to say allegedly, both Ted and Meghan announcing this great big, you know, collaboration, this connection. Now, when you think about it also, this makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't the head of Netflix want to champion this brand new association with the former royal, the Duchess of Sussex? I mean, surely you'd want to throw everything at it. Now, for some explicable reason, something went wrong behind the scenes, of which naturally I will find out. But what was interesting about this was that, you know, Ted suddenly was unavailable, but perhaps Meghan could roll it out herself. You know, maybe the focus shouldn't be on the two of them. You get the picture. So very, very early on, clearly, even though he'd been berated at that dinner, he knew instantly that this could potentially have a lot of problems. You see, when Meghan launched that, she just wanted the world to know that absolutely people really believed in her. And if the biggest company in the streaming land, i.e. Netflix, believed in her, then the rest of the world would, and other brand people would follow on. Now, as we all know, that really hasn't happened. When you launch a brand like that, most people start to look around to see exactly whether it's worth investing in, do you have any long-term prospects, that sort of stuff. But because it was such a ramshackly mess of, you know, candles or dog food or jam, or then it was wine, and nobody really knew what Meghan was going to come out with. But she thought this scattergun approach was the ideal way. Behind the scenes, what was really worrying Netflix, though, was the fact that another project that they'd paid for, that apparently Harry and Meghan were going to become executive producers, well, they just dismissed it. It never mentioned, right? Casting, all of this. I feel sorry for the author of Meet Me at the Lake, because, you know, I know how books work. A lot of people get optioned on books that never ever get made. Film studios, television streamers, they buy it up so they can lock you in. They give you a bit of money and then they decide if this is going to work. Now, when you think about it, this could have been a very good route for Meghan Markle to go down. You know, maybe with not really much responsibility, get all of that put behind her, and suddenly you've got this big film that may or may not become a hit on the streaming giant. This would have been, to me, the perfect opportunity for Meghan to push in a different direction. But according to the source that used to work there, it never truly got off the ground. Nobody could be bothered, and seemingly behind the scenes, it just frittered away. Now, diving in a little bit deeper with this, with Meet Me at the Lake, apparently Netflix still have the options on there, and there may be some development in the future, but it certainly won't be with Harry and Meghan as executive producers. And when you think about it, this could be the kiss of death, and I'm not being unkind, but, you know, the sort of forensicness of pulling that particular project apart, well, it's not very fair to the author or indeed the cast or the crew or the producer, is it? But of course, Ted said, if you remember, Meghan was a phenomenon. She could sell anything. Of course, the problem is now, he's now got to come out of this deal and salvage his career, because lots of people are looking at him saying, you made this decision. Was it the right one? And now, of course, Meghan has stopped posting on social media. Well, we know what that means. Don't find stories out, and it's lovely to share them with you on by royal appointment. The thing that I'd like to really find out is exactly when did this develop, or when did this start? Because it gives you a bigger picture of the person and how they operated. As I've said often on this show, I've worked with some movers and shakers in my time, and they are very, very good at manipulation and operational skills. What I mean by that is they basically, push forward, regardless of whether this is a good idea or not. And I don't know if you've ever worked for anybody like this, chums, but when it's wrong and it's a failure, you're not allowed to bring it up. You know the sort of thing I mean? You think, well, that was your idea to use that sleeve cover or that film poster or something like that. And I've always gone with the line of make it simple, make it basic, and make the public understand what you're selling. And of course, as we know, Meghan really has only ever been selling one thing, herself, as most celebrities, publicity people, whatever you want to call them, do. Now, when she arrived in the monarchy, what was really telling about this was she didn't feel she needed any media assistance because, after all, she'd come from Hollywood, right? I didn't know Toronto was in Hollywood, but there you go. But of course, Harry, was completely enamored. And as we know, Her Majesty the Queen said that Harry was a little bit too in love. And you couldn't see it. If you rewatch the videos, he cannot believe that this is a woman that he's now going to marry and she's going to be taking control of his life. He really wanted somebody to take control of his life. And Meghan Markle literally saw herself deliciously in that role. But as she suddenly knew exactly how the royal monarchy worked and her ideas for modernisation of charging for trooping the colour and stuff like that, here's the slip-up that Meghan did. You see, very quickly she claimed, if you remember, she didn't know too much about the monarchy. She had to Google things because she didn't know the national anthem, for instance. I mean, right. And of course, nobody could have talked her through that. They offered, but she didn't want to know. But you know what I mean? These are the things where people literally make mistakes, slip up to their own detriment, and then consequently, they just make themselves look stupid. One thing, though, that she really, really despised about the fact that Harry was sidelined. As she said, well, you're in the line of succession. Why are we not being given the same treatment? And this really all stemmed from the fact that she found out by talking to Harry and then seeing exactly what was going on inside Windsor. Hence the reason to move to Windsor from Kensington. And this is very pivotal in the story, right? She wanted to get closer to the Queen. And the real reason was this: she could not understand why Harry was not afforded the same opportunities as the line of succession. And by that, what she absolutely meant was, why couldn't she, or why couldn't Harry, or both of them together, be in on the meetings that William was? Now, these were the meetings that the Queen would discuss, and she did so with her son, of course, King Charles now, but how monarchy operates, what happens with the red boxes, the certain political aspects of things, meeting the prime ministers, the levels of security, what you have to do. There's a lot more to the job than people realise. That red box game every single day, and the Queen had to read things, sign them and agree. She couldn't it wasn't easy for her to say, I don't really like that. It would have to be an exception. Hence the reason, as I pointed out about investitures, they are recommended normally by the Prime Minister of the time. It's difficult unless that person has completely been against the monarchy. Could they say anything? Well, Meghan felt, along with Harry, that they should be sat at these meetings. After all, what if something catastrophic happened? Now, the story goes, and we all know that particular story, don't we? Now, as we know, you see, Meghan felt that by getting close to the Queen and by discussing exactly how the monarchy operates, this would really be beneficial for both her and Harry. They would need to know what was going to happen. And that sparked part of the problem as to why she realised that they were always going to be playing second fiddle. They were never going to get to the top of the tree. They were never going to be treated the same way. But what was interesting was, and this is again really pivotal in this story, is Her Majesty the Queen was a kind lady. She knew that there were always jealousies and factors and fights and stuff like that. She didn't want that. She wanted to make everybody equal. Hence the reason when she divvied up a lot of the charitable stuff, she decided, for instance, that the National Theatre, associated with the Queen for over 40 years, well, this will be ideal for Meghan because, this was theatre, the world of something that she would have loved. Stunned to receive nothing back as she just kind of, okay, this wasn't what they wanted. Now, Harry, I have to say, I was told from a source, really didn't mind, in fact, about the way that this was going, simply because he'd been told from an early age that this is how it was going to operate. But suddenly, when the wife came into the equation, it was kind of fighting for his corner. He suddenly thought, well, why shouldn't I get this? Why was I not allowed this in the first place? As I told you previously, and this was really interesting, when it came to the crunch point of exactly where Harry and Meghan were leaving to depart the monarchy because they couldn't get their own way, dress it up any way you want, she could not get her own way, so she decided that they were out. They were going to go and do something totally different. Now, as we then later learned, Prince of Wales, as he was then, King Charles, as he is now, very generously, and I mean generously, funded that whole first year. But what shocked the monarchy was the size of the house that they bought in Montecito. You know, they were sort of talking at the point of it was going to be a small lifestyle, not a big ostentatious lifestyle in Hollywood or anything like that. It was just going to be a normal living world. So consequently, the money that Charles had set aside was like pinochle money now. And as Harry then said, they signed on for Netflix because he was running short of money. Now, what was interesting was, according to another source, Prince William very, very quickly realised that, in fact, whichever way you look at it again, Harry had probably, shall we say, made himself out to be almost like Rockefeller in front of this woman, you know, because suddenly he's trying to catch up on the fact that Nottingham Cottage, Frogmore Cottage, these weren't giant palaces that Meghan thought she was going to be living in, like Rapunzel sending out her locks out the window for Harry to climb up. You get the picture. So he had to fund the lifestyle that she thought she was going to be getting. And this is where the relationship, in my opinion, as ever allegedly, has always been on the wrong footing. Meghan believed one thing, and perhaps Harry suggested another. But either way, they wanted it on the succession chats. And that was one area that absolutely 100% Her Majesty the Queen said, well, absolutely not. No, it just wouldn't happen. So consequently, Meghan snatched whatever designer handbags that she could get and decided that they could become billionaires elsewhere. Now, to coin a phrase, as ever, if you can, please like, share and comment respectfully. As I said, By Royal Appointment is your show. So, as much as I find out, I love to read your comments. I love to know exactly what you think to some of the stories that I've covered here today. And of course, how they came around. I always find it fascinating, and this is the bit that I do like to share with you, is, when you dig deeper, as I say, and when you meet people that were there, and more importantly, with the passage of time, you get to see a bigger story. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look back at this story, this will definitely be up there with the Edward and Mrs. Simpson style thing. This was a throw of the dice that they thought they could do and possibly win. But really, what Harry had was the security of the British monarchy, the security of his family. And more importantly, he thought that, well, he could do it without it, having never lived a real life outside of the palace walls. He'd been in the army, again, mollycoddled round there, a lot of support that people don't know about. And of course, many people have discussed it on digital platforms. But really, this was his first time as a commoner, if you like. Mortgage, children, bills, how do you pay them? And that, to me, has been part of the fascinating story of these particular segments. What's also interesting is that Meghan herself had such an utter belief in the fact that she could become a billionairess, all from the very scatty ideas of what she'd come up with. When you look at the likes of somebody like Pamela Anderson or Gwyneth Paltrow, they built, grounds beneath them of, strong, solid, independent work in acting, in promotions. Pamela Anderson is now a totally different character to what she was, say, in Barbed Wire or Baywatch. But for years, she's been working away, building the foundation, so she can afford to do a cookery show and just present it, to coin a phrase, with love. Meghan just figured, I'm here, it would be enough, and it will be a success. Netflix now, along with her, are finding out the hard way that an ex-duchess who's been in a bit of a soap isn't enough. What you need is real royals. They had that, but even Harry blew it. Of course, these are all developing stories, and I'm on to the next batch now. So until the next bi-royal appointment, as ever chums, do take care of yourselves. Neil Shaw in the very heart of London.